I think we're ready to kick off, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar today, launching our white paper on the clean tech landscape in MENA. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into the agenda, maybe allow me to provide a brief introduction to Enterprise Ireland. So we're the government agency responsible for supporting Irish businesses in their growth and expansion efforts globally. And today we're here to discuss the clean tech sector and explore the opportunities it presents in MENA. You might be wondering why we've chosen to launch this report now, and the reason is twofold. Firstly, this week marks the opening of WETEX taking place in Dubai, which is the largest exhibition in MENA focused on the water, energy, technology, and environment sectors. And of course, at the end of this month, COP28 is taking place in Expo City, Dubai, which is putting a global spotlight on climate action with the UAE at the heart of it. So there is a significant drive to highlight advancements and showcase innovation in these critical sectors. I also want to just take a minute to extend our thanks and appreciation to Sunergy Advisory for their collaboration on launching this white paper. The preparation, time, and expertise that has gone into this report, you'll see, has resulted in a very comprehensive analysis of the renewables, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and agri-tech sectors in the region. While Dr. Rayed's going to give us just some of the highlights in his opening presentation, we will be sharing a copy of the full report to everyone who's attended the webinar today. And then following Dr. Rayed's presentation, I'll then be joined by our expert panel. Each of our guest speakers holds a unique position within our key sectors of the report. So I'm going to be joined by Dr. Majed Mahmood, Director of Projects and Technical Affairs and Lead Renewable Energy Advisor at the Regional Centre for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, Mustafa Anzi, Chief Commercial Officer of IBEC Energy, Alex Malouf, who's our EV automotive expert, and David Kerwin, General Manager at Allain Farms. We've also set aside some time for a short Q&A session at the end, so please do think about your questions and feel free to send them through the Q&A box as we go along. So without any further delay, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Rayed Bakairat, Founder and Senior Advisor of Sunergy Advisory, to take us through his presentation. Thank you, Dr. Rayed.
Thank you, Roisin. I would like to thank also our attendees and panelists for taking the time to join us today. I would like to take a few moments to really just give a highlight about the clean tech sustainability paper that looks at the markets in the Arab countries in the Middle East, and just basically try to give a background maybe for the discussion with our panelists. So basically, as we all know, I mean, net zero carbon targets have been really the driving force, or you can call it the overarching goal that countries, governments, and private sector have been announcing. Everybody has been setting date and sight on 2050 and announcing interim goals around 2030. We finished obviously COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh last year, and we're all days away from COP28 taking place in the United Arab Emirates. And we really hope that the COP would provide the playbook, if you will, or the mechanism that really gauges everybody, government, companies, and so on, in terms of what are they doing to define their carbon footprint, and what mitigation methods are they following to really reduce that. In the Middle East and mainly in the GCC, we have a few countries that already announced a net zero carbon target, which is a good thing in the old oil and gas country, if you will. United Arab Emirates has been the first country to announce a net zero carbon by 2050, and they have an interim goal for reducing emissions of around 24% by 2030. Oman has a net zero carbon target by 2050, and they have a zero flaring actually goal by 2030. Bahrain as well has a zero carbon target by 2060. And Saudi Arabia, the largest market in the Middle East when it comes to sustainability and clean tech in general, has a net zero carbon target by 2060. And also there are private sector companies that announce actually net zero carbon targets by 2050 in Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh already launched a voluntary carbon market about a year ago. Now, when it comes to the energy transition in the Arab world, really, I mean, we have a huge economic opportunity in the problem in of itself. And we all know the climate change is really an existential challenge for humanity in general. And the Middle East sits in a position where we are actually significantly challenged in terms of the ability of the resilience and the ability of the infrastructure to withstand the impacts of climate change. There are many reports that talk about temperature rise on average exceeding 5 degrees, especially in the GCC. And obviously, this will require significant financing and funding. And the paper does allude to the required financing and the available financing sources in the different sectors and the countries that we're looking at. To date, most of the financing is going towards electricity or energy and transport. And we see less funding going towards sectors like water and agriculture. And the amounts we're looking at for funding the transition are significant. I mean, according to ESCWA, just looking at Iraq, Egypt, and Morocco, we're looking at over 425 billion USD required to take these countries along the energy transition path and achieve net zero carbon targets. So in this paper, we really tried to select the main categories of analysis to be around renewables, energy efficiency, agri-tech, and e-mobility. And we tried to give a snapshot or highlights of these sectors in selected markets. So what we looked at in terms of markets, really, we tried to take markets that are indicative and significant in the Middle East. So we looked at Oman, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And obviously there are variations, population of under 5 million in Oman to over 100 million in Egypt. And you have Saudi Arabia being a significant market with a GDP of over 1.1 trillion US dollars. But these are the markets that the paper these are the countries, I should say, and the markets that the paper focuses on, covering the sectors of renewables, agri-tech, energy efficiency, and e-mobility. Now I would like just to give highlights of some of the results in this paper. So for renewables, if we look at Saudi Arabia, for example, obviously Saudi Arabia has announced reaching 50% clean energy by 2030 when it comes to electricity or power generation. Saudi Arabia has a target of roughly 60 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. And this is managed by the REPDO, Renewable Energy Project Development Office, under the National Renewable Energy Program, NREP, part of the Vision 2030 for Saudi Arabia. A lot of the renewables focus is on photovoltaics, although there is a big component for wind as well, CSP. The Public Investment Fund, the Sovereign Fund of Saudi Arabia, is actually managing and investing in for about 70% of the program. And it's important to say that these figures actually, I think, will be increased by several gigawatts if you include the green hydrogen economy, which is beginning to take shape in the GCC and in Saudi Arabia. We have a significant large project that already started activity in NEOM. And this will support the deployment of solar, wind, as well as push storage forward. Moving over to energy efficiency. And here we're looking at, again, just to give an example of the United Arab Emirates. The report covers each sector for every country, but I'm just giving highlights and then handing it over to the panelists. So UAE, in terms of energy efficiency, was really one of the earlier countries that had a super ESCO. At the time, it had ESCO and actually a carbon center. The energy efficiency market in the UAE is valued around 3.2 billion USD in 2023 and still has a double-digit growth. There are different initiatives that vary from the federal level, on the governmental level in United Arab Emirates, and there are emirate level initiatives. One of the most significant ones is Dubai DIES, the Dubai Integrated Energy Strategy 2030, which is basically looking at 30% energy reduction over the next 7 years or so compared to business as usual, which is really a significant target. And there is a lot of emphasis on green buildings. There is the 1,000+ Green Buildings Initiative with a big focus on minimizing consumption for governmental buildings. And there is obviously a focus on the industrial demand. Another example, looking at the Agritech here, just giving an example from Oman. Agriculture in general, and here we look at Agritech really as deploying technology to improve crop yield or looking at maximizing water efficiency. So for Oman, agriculture is one of the main pillars of their 2040 Sustainable Development Strategy. There is a big emphasis on aquaculture in Oman. So there is aquaculture projects are expected to contribute approximately 5.2 billion to the Sultanate's GDP, and the aquaculture market alone is projected to rise to over 900 million USD by 2040. So I'll just go through the main snapshots, give you highlights of the report. So on e-mobility, looking at Egypt, there has been a lot of discussion about electric vehicles in Egypt, especially with the announcement of local manufacturing of electric vehicles, which is what is interesting in the local manufacturing of electric vehicles is going to have a high percentage of local components. Between 50 and 60% of the components going to Egyptian-made electric vehicles will be made in Egypt. We're seeing the hockey stick taking shape for electricity market in Egypt. Numbers are doubling between 1,000, used to be 1,000 to 1,800 EVs in 21. Now it's almost 4,000 by the end of 23. And this number will accelerate and grow multifold, I think, in the next months or couple of years. In terms of EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, which is always a big topic, and I'm sure the panel will delve into that. There are different programs. One of them is the program done by Infinity EV, installing 135 stations and over 500 charging points in Egypt. And there are several initiatives for public transportation, e-buses across different cities in Egypt. So with that, really, the aim is just to give you a few highlights. The details will be in the paper, which I encourage everyone to download and go through. With that, I give it back to you, Roisin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rayed. So if I can just invite all of our panelists to switch on their videos and mics if they haven't done so already. And thank you for providing a great teaser, I think in advance of everyone being able to download the full report. And thank you for setting the stage for what should now be a very interesting discussion. If I can, and we'll do a quick round table of introductions. Maybe Dr. Majed, if I could please start with you.
Okay, it's a pleasure being with you today. I'm Majed Mahmoud, the Technical Director of the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And in fact, the presentation that was presented by Dr. Rayed shows very well snapshots of what is happening in the region. There are developments, big developments happening now, and I assume that while listening to the other colleagues also will hear other interesting aspects. So thanks very much for the paper, for the presentation of Dr. Rayed, and for allowing me to join this very nice webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Majed. Alex, if I could pick on you next for a quick introduction.
Sure. Thank you very much, Roisin, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I am based in Riyadh, working in the EV industry, had a history of working in let's call it the sustainability sector with companies like ABB, Schneider Electric. And as we're going to see during the Q&A, there is obviously a lot happening within the kingdom and also as well the wider GCC and MENA region when it comes to smart mobility, electric mobility, and yeah, looking forward to getting into the Q&A shortly.
Thank you, Alex. And David?
Hi, sorry, a few technical problems there. My name is David Curran. I'm the General Manager of Lane Farms. We're a dairy and poultry processor. We process about 10 million kilos of poultry meat per annum. We sell about 200 million table eggs in our poultry division, and then we have a dairy division with about 15,000 cows here on site behind me. So this has obviously piqued our interest and indeed our obligations, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, David. And last but certainly not least, Mustafa, could you please give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, thank you. Mustafa Anzi, Chief Commercial Officer for IBEC Energy, an energy services company based here in Dubai. Throughout my career, actually, I've been working in the energy and sustainability domain. I started in the Netherlands, working for public and private entities. In 2013, moved to Dubai when the first Super ESCO was established. It had ESCO here in Dubai, and yeah, since then active here in the market.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the panelists today for giving us your time and talking through this very important topic on the clean tech landscape across the region. So to kick off, maybe let's get an idea of the current state of affairs across the board in each of the sectors that we're looking at today. Dr. Majed, maybe I can start with yourself. Could you please provide an overview of the current adoption and growth of renewable energy technologies in the Middle East region? What are the key trends and developments that you're seeing?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Of course, being in the domain since 1994, I have seen a lot of changes. In fact, just less than 15 years ago, we had only 5 MENA countries, 5 Arab countries, I would say, with projects, I mean commercial projects in the field of solar and wind technology, which are the 2 main technology if you are asking about the trend. Solar, photovoltaic, then concentrated solar power, and then wind energy. To a less extent, we have waste to energy in the region. So 15 years ago, we say we had only 5 countries leading. Now we have all the 22 Arab countries with projects, commercial projects, targets, etc., in the field of renewable energy. We have seen the net zero targets. Dr. Raad summarized them very well. We have 2 countries in the region now having 100% renewable energy target by 2035, which are Djibouti, surprisingly this was not mentioned, but Djibouti and Morocco. Of course, there is different scale. Djibouti is a small country relatively. The capacities are rather small, but we can understand the logic behind resorting to renewable energy in terms of the energy security aspect and lack of resources. We have, in fact, very ambitious targets all over the region right now. Just a couple of weeks ago, Egypt amended its target from 42% renewable energy by 2035 to 5 years earlier, so it will be 42% by 2030. So now we are seeing an accelerated pace of development. And as Dr. Raad highlighted clearly in this regard, that we are seeing a lot of momentum in the field of green hydrogen, for example. So the numbers announced would also be larger. We are seeing target, for example, in Algeria, 37% by 2030. Saudi Arabia, which was brought by Dr. Raad, also around 30% by 2030. Around 59 gigawatts. In Egypt, 50 gigawatts, and so on. Emirates, of course, 44 by 2050. Libya also, although the situation politically is not that much stable, but they have a target of 22%, and so on. So we have very ambitious targets all over the region. And based on our assessment at RCRE, the announced officially committed targets in the region surpass 200 gigawatts of solar and wind projects, 200 gigawatts. And this is, it could be doubled if you add those announced pipeline of projects, etc. But the committed targets based on the strategies, based on the action plans, because we have been supporting most of the Arab countries in designing their action plans in renewable energy and energy efficiency, this exceeds 200 gigawatts. And this means a lot of investment opportunities in the region. This is one thing that you can capture on the renewable energy in the region. And you are seeing all the time that we are speaking about growth, but the dominating technology now is photovoltaic. And photovoltaic, we have more than 8 gigawatts in the region, maybe even more. Now, if you calculated what was announced in the past 11 months. It is not calculated in the targets, in the records yet, but we'll have more than 7 gigawatt at least of photovoltaic and almost 3 or 4 gigawatts of wind, assuming for now. And this means that, in fact, these two technologies are seeing, I would say, first of all, good potential all over the region, technical potential, but a conducive business environment, because most of the projects are now relying on private sector. And to a less extent, we are seeing CSP in the region, concentrated solar power. So if you can look into the figures by the end of 2022, hopefully will come soon with the 2023 numbers, you can see that if photovoltaic capacity is around 7.5, CSP is only 0.75, 1/10 of the photovoltaic. So we can see the trend clearly. What is lagging behind is waste to energy. Other sources, of course, of renewables are not that much mature, but technologically we are seeing waste to energy is somehow lagging behind in terms of this. Of course, hydropower is there in the region, but hydropower potential is almost consumed everywhere except in few countries. And we are seeing a trend now toward pumped storage facility. And this is part of the solution for the nature of renewable energy being a variable source of the fluctuating nature of renewable energy. So this is another part of what is happening in the region. Another issue that we are seeing, if you allow me that, now we are seeing what very competitive electricity prices for renewable energy in the region. Very, very competitive. You can see prices up to 1.04 cents in project in KSA, 1.1 cents in other, 2 cents even in countries without huge incentives, I would say. But and this is not only about the resource, the quality of the resource. It's about having successful public-private partnership, about having a good bankable terms for the project, BBAs that are good, trustworthy of takers. We are seeing also some incentives given, like, for example, land availability against symbolic fees, for example, or no fees at all. A grid interconnection being extended to the project locations, etc. So all these elements that create the conducive business environment are being created all over the region, not only in one country. To a different extent, yes, from one country to the other, but we are seeing this is happening all over the region. Also, we are seeing in terms of policies that now there is some sort of phasing out of feed-in tariff, which 5 years ago was a prevailing scheme. Been banned, for example, in Egypt project was a feed-in tariff project. Algeria had several feed-in tariff projects, Palestine, etc. But now we are seeing more toward competitive bids and auctioning. And also we are seeing most of the projects are also coming, especially in the green hydrogen field, as direct negotiations. So direct proposal submission, we call it like this, which was common first in Jordan 10 years ago. But now it seems like it will be the trend in the coming few years that we'll have either direct proposal submission or competitive bids and auctions. Feed-in tariff is being phased out, except for example, waste to energy, because it's still in the introductory phase of the market.
Of course.
Yes, and so these are some highlights. There are others, but I can expand more later on. I would give the opportunity to the colleagues to.
Thank you. Before you answer all of my questions, Dr. Majed, thank you very much. That was a really comprehensive overview, and thank you for the focus on the renewables side as well. So obviously that's something that's extremely important to the progress of the region here, but also before we go to, developing and diversifying the energy mix and looking at all of these renewables, something that's obviously very important, as well as reducing the energy that we're currently consuming and looking at what efficiencies we can make across the board. So if I can jump over to yourself, Mustafa, from your perspective in IBEC Energy, which has a relatively unique offering that crosses between two different sectors, construction and energy savings. Can you tell me, what do you think are the most promising areas for clean tech commercialization in the Middle East? And how can companies looking at the Middle East market best contribute to these developments?
Okay, thank you. So basically, when we look at what was presented by Dr. Raed, we have seen that several countries and also private stakeholders have set net zero targets So now the question comes is how to achieve those targets. And most of our energy consumption in our region, when you look at the built environment, is coming from cooling. So in our field or day-to-day work, we work with new construction project and we work with existing buildings, and both have a different approach in terms of making them more energy efficient. However, what they have in common is how to minimize the cooling requirement of your building. So if you can build a new building, new structure that requires less cooling, you can install smaller HVAC equipment, smaller cooling equipment. The smaller equipment will require less energy consumption, and that will result in a smaller, let's say, renewables capacity to cover up your remaining energy consumption. So similarly for the retrofit market is how to make buildings more efficient and make them closer to achieve net zero target, is to look at how can we minimize those cooling requirements from the buildings. In addition to the building envelope and reducing your cooling needs, digitalization is also an important factor. We have seen in various projects that if you don't keep track of the performance of your building, you lose track, basically. So even if you have implemented several measures to improve the energy performance of your building, buildings are dynamic. Operations change, behavior change, a lot of things can change inside your building. And it is very important that your energy consumption is adapting to those changes. And also making sure that in case you go out of track, then you can investigate, explore. I think last week we were at a session with the Clean Energy Business Council, and I gave an example of my personal experiences. Is that I received a message from DIWA, the local utilities company, message telling me that I consumed 72% more water than the average last 3 days, which is immediately an alarm for me. After investigating, I found that, for example, in one of the washrooms, the water tank was not holding properly, and there was water leaking without anyone noticing. So that's why digitalization is very important, to make sure whatever we implement, we also make sure it's functioning properly. And then, of course, the renewables portion. Yeah. So these three combinations, looking at the envelope, looking at digitalization, and the renewables.
Thanks so much, Mustafa. I like the focus as well, obviously, is that a lot of it does come down to buildings. And I know some of the Irish attendees on the webinar are probably laughing from their chilly desks back in Ireland, wondering how cooling the buildings could be the biggest issue. And they're looking at heating as one of the common problems. But of course, you know, they're interchangeable depending on where you are, and buildings seem to be one of the biggest users of energy globally. So we can do a little bit of a step change then just across to yourself, Alex. Could you please share some insights then on the current status of electric vehicle adoption and infrastructure development in the Middle East and its impact on sustainability and economic growth?
So thank you for the question, Royce. And I think the easiest way to summarize this is that we are at the beginning of the race. We have big ambitions in the region. For example, Saudi Arabia wants to become an EV manufacturing hub. But if you look at the state of play right now in terms of infrastructure, you really are looking at the UAE, where Tesla essentially launched in the region. You're looking at Jordan as well, because Tesla also set up its operations in Jordan a couple of years back. They reduced, or they've shrunk down their operational size recently. And also you're looking at somewhat at Egypt. But I think, again, if you look across the region, there is ample room for growth. Governments are very eager, and they're very interested in this space. For example, Saudi is very much looking to invest in a big way in terms of manufacturing. And along with that comes infrastructure, comes also incentives and policies to support EVs. You look at other markets, Qatar, Abu Dhabi, they've all looked to launch their own EV OEM brands, which is very interesting. What we obviously need to think about is the challenges to EV growth. Not surprisingly, certain parts of the region, you have high subsidies on petrol. And also as well, if you look at the opportunity, the region is very much all about vehicles. It's all about cars. Some cities do have pretty well developed public transportation, but they are in the minority. So if you think about the opportunities there, in terms of the infrastructure piece, in terms of EV growth, and even ancillary areas such as smart grids, electricity infrastructure in general, there is a huge opportunity for the industry to do a lot more in terms of what's happening.
Thank you, Alex. And I think really just coming to terms with the broad scope of potential opportunities just from listening to all of you speaking so far and covering so many different verticals within the region. There's a huge amount of, yes, challenges, but also opportunities in the space as well. So that brings me also to our fourth speaker, which is David, covering the agri-tech sector. There's obviously significant opportunity for carbon reduction across that sector, David. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how Alain Farms has incorporated any clean tech or sustainability practices into its operations. What technologies have you found most effective in this region?
Yeah. Effectively, we would come at it from we're a primary processor. We say like the co-ops back in Ireland, and I suppose like in tandem with our colleagues at home, we sometimes feel a bit picked on in terms of agriculture being, always maybe an easier target, but I suppose from a technology point of view, we've split it into two ways, effectively operational and farming itself. So if I could give an example on the farming side, we would have a treatment plant for water here. So basically water is a precious commodity where we are here in the region. And in common with all cow farms and dairy farms in the region, agriculture here is based on effectively an Arizona state farming model. So our biggest cost is our feed, which we have to import. So we bring in compressed alfalfa. We would look at all our animals are based effectively indoors. So we have corral coolers brought in terms of keeping the body temperature at the optimal level. Then that would be the farming angle there. Then on the technology side, we would have RFID tags to detect animal health, any sickness, any early warning systems, anything like that. So we'd be very, in common with the industry here, we'd be very much driving that agenda there in terms of early detection of anything, in terms of a drop in yield, what's causing it. We have a dietitian brought in from the US on a quarterly basis who, for rationing purposes. Then on the manufacturing side, effectively we have PET. So we blow our own PET bottles. So there's a big push obviously onto the paper packaging. Now that is not new technology, it's around a long time. However, in this region, we also have to be aware that the consumers like to see what they're buying. So they like milk in either glass or PET bottle. So I think for us, what we have done is we have actually gone into recycling PET. So we basically manufacture preforms, which are recyclable, which is fantastic. However, they are 30% more expensive. So we're right. I think Alex mentioned the journey. We're right on that cusp here in terms of trying to balance cost, food security obligations from our UAE government, and the environment at the same time. So it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, I like what you said there. It's striking the right balance. And it leads me very nicely into my next topic. And it's something that Dr. Rayed outlined in his presentation as well, is that the Middle East is a region with a very different climate. And of course, that brings with it its own unique challenges, but also opportunities. So Mustafa, I'd like to come to you maybe first on this one. From what you're seeing, what are the most common challenges that organizations would face when implementing energy efficiency measures in the MENA region, and how do you think they can be addressed?
Well, I think one of the most common one, what we see here in the market, is where you have the split incentive challenge. Basically, the owner of the building is not the one who's paying for the bill because the facility is leased out. So that can be applicable for hotels, for offices, for residential, various type of property. So we really need to work on a model and along with the utilities companies, for example, and other stakeholders where, for example, certain investments that are done in making buildings more efficient can be recovered from the stakeholder who's benefiting from the energy savings. Otherwise, we keep having this dilemma where one is investing and the other one is benefiting, and then projects will never happen. So even when you have, for example, a building that is owned and operated by the same stakeholders, you have certain challenges. You have challenges when it comes to the engineering know-how for some stakeholders. Not everyone has an engineering team that understand energy savings measure, energy conservation measures. And there are so many bidders here in the market, so many service companies that provide a wide range of solutions. So how to select between those different solutions? So you would need like a solid engineering, let's say, team, or you could outsource that to a consultant. Nowadays, we see various consultants who more or less are specialized in guiding building owners throughout the process of developing the energy baseline, preparing for a tender, selecting the right service companies for a tender, and helping them also with the review and selection of the best, let's say, value-adding proposal. So when it comes to the procurement process, it can also be a challenge from the customer side because energy services companies, they do their own studies. So they could be at site at the same time for the same duration, but come up with different solutions based on their expertise and know-how. And these solutions could have more or less maybe the same investment and same savings, but there could also be significant differences. And there also we see that sometimes it's a dilemma for end user to make let's say, a selection. At the end, you can go with a project of 10 million that saves you 2 million, and you have a payback of 5 years. But investing 5 million and recovering 1 million per year will also give you a payback of 5 years. So which one to choose? And then again, also here you have, let's say, consultants who can help out in that case. And last one, but not least, is the measurement and verification. Understanding what is your current baseline and what is impacting your baseline, your operating hours, if you're a hotel, maybe the guest nights, in terms of a dairy farm, maybe the output, the product delivered. So if that changes, that also impacts your energy savings. So to give a very quick example, if you have an office building and it is operated for 6 hours or 8 hours per day, and then suddenly you operate it for 12 hours a day, you can expect that your energy consumption will increase and not expect the same energy savings that actually were implemented in your facility. So here is where the measurement and verification plan comes into play. And unfortunately, we see sometimes in the market that there is a gap, and especially when it comes to finance, they want, let's say, to invest 10 million, and they want to see 10 million or 2 million savings per year. And that 2 million, of course, is dependent or is a function of various variables, like I said, the temperature, operating hours, occupancy, etc. That's something that needs to be properly communicated and understood from both stakeholders. Otherwise, you cannot avoid disappointments maybe from one of the stakeholders. So basically addressing the split incentive, addressing the engineering know-how to compare different solution technologies, having the procurement process aligned to understand how to select between different offerings, and the measurement and verification process are things that we need to look at to remove those barriers.
So maybe in summary, ensuring all stakeholders are aligned in terms of the output and the objectives across the board, really.
Correct. And how it is measured throughout the whole process. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Dr. Majed, if I can come to you then, maybe looking at the stakeholders, could you elaborate rather on the importance of public awareness and education in overcoming the barriers to clean tech and renewables adoption?
Well, I think Mustafa is provided an excellent segue to me for my intervention here. And in fact, when we speak about awareness first, there are several stakeholders engaged in that. And when we speak about multi-stakeholder approach, we think about the policy-making level, the politicians, members of parliament, etc. And here we need to sharpen our messages to revolve around issues like energy security, like co-benefits of sustainable energy, climate resilience, etc. Because these are the things that they are more interested in. While we are going into the sectoral interventions, whether renewable energy or energy efficiency, we need to showcase what are the, I would say, the win-win situation that we are achieving through adopting sustainable energy solutions. And for example, if you go to the agri-food sector, the solar pumping now is a market on its own in most of the agriculture-based economies in the region. And you can find financial mechanisms adopting this. And this is because, first of all, the lack of diesel, fuel, the suitability of the, but also because we have what we call leading by example. We have the government adopting technologies and adopting solar pumping technologies, and increasing the awareness of the farmers on how to use these technologies and availing the solution in the market through a good qualification scheme that allow reputable companies to work in the market. This is one example of the sector. For example, in the tourism sector, which is important for a country like Egypt, like Jordan, like Tunisia, like Morocco, you will find them being branded as green tourism, being climate friendly is more attractive as a selling proposition for them. And this value added is what you sell to them. In the industry, when you look into energy efficiency in the industry, you are improving the competitiveness by lowering the energy consumption and increasing the production. So here you are giving them another value proposition. So it's important to tailor the right message to the right audience. This is the key thing that we look at. For the education side, we are seeing a lot of change happening in the region right now. Now we have several both undergraduate and postgraduate curricula focusing on sustainable energy technology, engineering, economics, finance, etc. And this is a thing that was not there 5 or 10 years ago. Another part of this is the vocational training and building the skills of the workforce to respond to the huge targets that we spoke about earlier today. And creating this sort of qualified workforce is an important part. And adding to that, another part related to the, I would say, the certification schemes for the equipments and how to ensure that good quality products are in the market. And this requires a different intervention, different awareness, a different capacity building, a different also, I would say, enhancing the implementation modalities of those who are working on the Ministries of Industry and the standardization on importing, etc., control on the imports, etc., so that you ensure a proper market functioning. So you have multidisciplinary approach that should target each sector on its own. But for example, the financing last intervention, the banking sector. A few years ago, we have found that the language that we spoke as energy experts and the energy companies, etc., are not well absorbed, not well comprehended, not well understood by the banking sector. And it was important to fine-tune, ensure that those who work in the energy field are giving them the right taxonomy, the right words, and they understand our need, and vice versa also. So now we have worked a lot as RECRE in what we call sustainable finance and green finance, and we built the capacity of tens of banks, so that they are now having their own sustainability unit, measuring the project also from the energy saving perspective, carbon emission reduction perspective, etc. And this is part ensuring that the loans, the customer base are responding also to the sustainability issues. And on the other hand, we built the capacities of the small and medium enterprises on how to have bankable proposals, so that they speak the language in terms of the return on investment, in terms of credit worthiness, etc. So all these together, in fact, are part of shaping the ecosystem And awareness is really important. Knowing how to shape the message is important, and also enhancing the implementation capacities of different actors within the society to respond to the strategic objectives is really important to achieve the goals.
You know, you're absolutely right, and you make an excellent point that, you know, green financing is definitely something that's come on in leaps and bounds in the last couple of years when it wasn't really discussed before, and it really is needed to drive forward the agenda. If I can bring it back then very quickly to Agritech again, David, in terms of sustainable agriculture, what are you seeing as the main challenges and, I suppose, potential opportunities for the adoption of environmentally friendly farming practices and agri-tech solutions?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge we would see, and any company like ourselves would see, would be access to high quality, affordable food. So basically, we have something for everybody every day, and whether that's a liter of milk, whether that's a kilo of chicken. We'd also have the complication of capped pricing. So unlike a lot of markets, the market in this region tends to have a capped pricing, so you cannot go above a certain price. So if you cannot make a viable business from that, you either, you know, you have to backward integrate, maybe take some functions that you previously outsourced back in-house. We have done a lot of that here in terms of backward integration over the last couple of years. So that would be, I think, access to high quality, affordable food would be challenge number one. How do we balance that off with our other obligations? And the second challenge for us would be demanding retailers, our customers. We service 18,000 sales points every single day. So this is a 365 operation, everything from supermarkets, convenience retailing, hotels, hospitals, military institutions, whatever, whoever consumes dairy and poultry effectively. So the biggest challenge for us would be, how do we balance, we say, service level to customers, who in turn have a service level expectation of us as a processor at a certain price, but even are already looking at, you know, the green agenda on their side. The, you know, plastic bags have been removed here, similar to home for some time. You know, it is becoming, we actually do a glass bottle currently that we're experimenting. We're doing a pilot with one retailer in particular in terms of how do we recycle that glass and reuse it, and, you know, initiatives like that. So in summary, I suppose our two biggest challenges really would be to get that price point with affordable food, satisfy our customers, who in turn satisfy consumers, all while meeting our green agenda obligations. It's an ongoing challenge.
Absolutely. And I can imagine some of the sustainability measures that you've had to implement, while costly, should also be providing cost efficiencies in the long run, and hopefully reducing some of the costs that are being driven down to the customer at the end of the day.
Correct, and I think governments, you know, when you look at legislation in any government, you know, this country is no different to any other, either regionally or indeed globally. A plastic tax is coming. Now, what percentage that will be, we'll have to wait and see. We've got excellent help and advice from, we see the two major government entities here would be ADAPTA, the regulatory body, and the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. So we would be lobbying, yes, but we'd also be meeting them on a monthly basis now in terms of what's coming down the line. Can we get an early start? Here's the advantages. So it's an ongoing balance.
And it's brilliant that you have that ongoing open dialogue between the public and private sector. It's fantastic. If I can just bring it then across to the role of technology and innovation. I mean, technology and innovation, they play an important role in adopting clean technologies. Alex, if we're looking at the EV sector, how would you say cutting edge technologies such as IoT, smart grids, how are they being integrated into the various aspects of clean tech, including the electric vehicle infrastructure in the Middle East?
But I think in many ways we're very lucky here, in the sense that we have a lot of white space. So we don't have much legacy infrastructure, one. And two, there's a focus on bringing the latest and greatest technologies in, and then integrating them. You know, an example is, say, 5G, with the telecommunications networks. The Gulf has been one of the first globally to roll out 5G networks, and we are going to see the same thing when it comes to clean tech as well. We're going to see new concepts being rolled out. We're going to see a lot of proof of concepts as well. And I think that opens the door for opportunities for companies all over the world. You're going to see a lot of new ideas being rolled out in places like Dubai, but also in new developments like NEOM. So, if you have new tech that you feel is going to provide a lot of value, this is definitely one region that you should be targeting, and finding the key decision makers, policy makers to engage with, to basically say, do the sell, do the pitch, to say, look, we have something that you will benefit from, and you don't want to miss out on.
A really good point. And then I'll just stick on the same topic then, and I'll come across to yourself, Mustafa. Can you share insights into how technological innovation and disruptive business models are driving the growth of clean tech and sustainability?
Yeah, so we've seen that over the last decade, the ESCO model, or basically the energy performance contracting model, made an impact, mainly through the shared savings model and the guaranteed savings model. I think besides looking at the technological development and enhancement in the market, we also need to look at the business model, like you rightly mentioned. And what we see now in the market is that the as-a-service model is picking up, where, for example, you have an investor who would invest in your infrastructure, building infrastructure, and then recover that on a monthly payment or based on output over a longer duration. That's why we need to look at how can we upgrade the existing ESCO contracts or ESCO models to an ESCO Plus, where you combine a guaranteed savings model with a as-a-service model, and maybe also with a PPA, where you can, for example, also install your solar PV systems. In addition to that, we can also look at adding that or adding, let's say, carbon offsetting to that equation. So basically enhancing or upgrading the models that have shown actually impact in the market. There have been various projects. If you look at the UAE and also in Saudi, the largest markets when it comes to energy efficiency, billions have been invested already in various projects, and they have shown results. So I think now to accelerate that journey, and especially now with private and public entities setting net zero targets, we need to upgrade those models. They have proven their value add, but will it be enough for us to achieve our targets in the next couple of decades? So I think when we combine different models, or that will help actually to accelerate.
Thank you very much, Mustafa.
Yeah.
What I want to do now is I'm actually going to just jump to some of the audience questions, because I'm conscious that we're running out of time and there are some really interesting ones coming through. Alex, I've got a couple here that are targeted towards the EV sector, so I might combine two questions in one here. First part of the question being, in terms of electric mobility, what is the major barriers for adoption? You might just expand on that question a little bit more. And then in terms of regulations in Egypt and in MENA in general, are the regulations available to start a transformation towards e-mobility, in your opinion?
Okay, so let me start with the former first. You've got a lot of issues at play. One is that people are much used to their ICE, their internal combustion engine vehicles. Petrol is very cheap. Most countries, there are not many options when it comes to electric vehicles. And we also need more infrastructure. In terms of boosting EV sales, you've got to do two things. You look at incentives and you got to look at infrastructure. And we have to do both across the region. So that's one. In terms of the policy piece, a lot of the policies are actually in place in a sense. I think the policies could be made easier in terms of infrastructure. There's still a lot of paperwork required to set up, for example, a DC charger in most countries across the region. But in terms of actually importing EVs, selling EVs, getting them registered with the regulator, you can find EVs for sale all over the Middle East. And you look, for example, at Jordan, and the reason why EVs have taken off there is because they are not taxed by customs. So they are in many ways much more affordable, especially with petrol prices in Jordan, than you would look at a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So, you know, we are at the start of this journey. There is a lot to do, but it's very positive in terms of where we're headed.
Perfect. Thanks so much. That's a really comprehensive response. I want to just direct this question at yourself, David, then we're going to flip over to the biogas industry. And the question is there a biogas industry in the region, or is there one planned for the region, i.e. the extraction of biogas from agricultural waste, from food waste? Would you have any insights on that?
I would. There is biogas. It would be at the very beginnings. There is one commercial dairy farm who has it, based in Dubai. A competitor of ours who have actually successfully installed a biogas facility in the last 3 years. We've looked at it ourselves. It would be in our short-term plan. And just maybe as an offshoot to that, just to give a live example, I suppose, when you have farms of 15 or 20,000 cows, you're going to produce a lot of manure. So what we would have is manure recovery. So what we actually do is we built I think Mustafa mentioned rightly about collaboration of infrastructure. We teamed up with a local entity. So basically we co-funded a plant just next door to the farm here for recovery of wet manure. And we dry that one, we treat it, and we sell it commercially as fertilizer to various municipalities, flower beds, roundabout beautification projects, and things like that. Just as a kind of, it's been very successful for us. We only got into it about 18 months ago, and we actually have a commercial business selling 25 kilo bags of fertilizer for something that is effectively for free, that's created by the animals here. So just a small example in terms of how we're looking at what else can we do in a very energy and water capital process. What can we do with the output of that outside of producing high quality dairy ingredients?
Thank you, David. And a bit of a follow-up question as a result of that as well, which you might give some more detail to after the fact. Can you ask David to please explain the internal process of approving an energy efficient or a solar renewable project? They can sometimes see delays in the procurement process.
Yeah, I think every company has its own. We say we're very much into digitization, so we would have a REBA platform. So if I'm buying either a technological solution, we will go with an RFQ. That would be then, you'd have to meet certain criteria as to become an approved supplier, like any onboarding of suppliers. And then we put it onto a platform like a REBA, where we have effectively a bidding process. So we have, I think of old, there has been a lot of challenges in anything when you're going into a big project like this. So about 3 years ago, we took the initiative to say, there must be a better way. We went out, we saw how far larger companies are doing it globally, and we adapted a system that would suit our needs here. And whether that is buying biogas infrastructure, whether that is buying new sales vans, whether that is buying new dairy production lines, we go through the same process. So we would have a list of approved suppliers, and my procurement colleagues are probably better placed to advise in terms of the onboarding of that.
Very clear. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to do one final question, and I'm going to open it out, but maybe pick on Mustafa or Majed, because I think it might be most relevant. And perhaps Mustafa, the query is in relation to building rating systems, and is there any in the region, and are there any planned for existing buildings?
Yeah, there are actually local building rating systems. So in Dubai, you have, for example, Safat, which is run by Dubai municipality. And similarly in Abu Dhabi also, you have the Pearl rating scheme. So these are a bit more customized to the local, let's say, needs and requirements, with maybe a more heavier component for water usage in this case.
Perfect. That's great. I think it's going to...
Yeah,
sorry,
and in addition,
go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition, of course, also LEED is mainly considered here in the region. BREEAM is less actually of known in the market or considered. So it's mainly the local rating systems or LEED that's been considered, which is more global, of course.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
There are several, in fact, if I may comment on that, there are several rating systems, local ones, as Mustafa highlighted, national, I mean, and for example, in Egypt, there is a green pyramids also. So there is, so we have the region several. The key issue here is the enforcement of this rating system and also the energy efficiency in building codes. So this is a critical issue that we should work all on.
Perfect. I agree. And I'm going to draw a line under it there while we're just about on time and let everybody get on with their day. So as we wrap up, that was a very, very informative session. I think everyone can agree with. I'd like to just once again extend our thanks to all of our panelists for their time and for their contributions. You've definitely helped us to highlight the challenges, but also the boundless opportunities and the future outlook for the clean tech landscape in MENA. So we're very grateful for your participation. Thank you so much. I'd also like to express our thanks to Sunergy Advisory again for their collaboration in producing the white paper. And as I've said, I think we only touched the surface here. So we appreciate your partnership and the collective effort in advancing the importance of the clean tech sector by working together. And as I mentioned earlier, as a token of our appreciation and to ensure that all of the insights shared today continue to benefit the region, we will be sending a full copy of the white paper to everyone who has attended the webinar. So once again, thank you to our speakers, our collaborating partner, Sunergy, and to all of you for joining us as well. If you have any additional questions or need further information on any of the topics that we spoke about, please don't hesitate to reach out and speak to us here in Enterprise Ireland. So we look forward to future collaborations and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.